25 years later, Elias was a man built of regrets and nicotine stains. He was homeless, drifting through the city, when he ducked into a high-end art gala just to steal a glass of champagne. He froze. On the wall was a triptych of massive oil paintings titled The Three Faces of Absence. The first painting showed a woman's exhausted eyes. The second, a hollow doorway. The third, a man's back walking into a storm. "It's $200,000, a cold voice whispered behind him. Elias turned to see Maya, the eldest triplet. She was draped in silk, the city's most celebrated artist. She didn't recognize the haggard man, but he saw his own nose, his own brow, carved into her regal face. When he tried to speak, she simply signaled security. "This man is breathing on the canvas," she said dismissively. "Remove him." Weeks later, Elias collapsed in an alleyway. His lungs were failing. A lifetime of bad choices finally catching up. He woke up in a sterile, white room, hooked to a machine. A surgeon stood over him, reviewing his chart with clinical detachment. This was Clara, the middle triplet, a world-renowned cardiothoracic surgeon. She knew exactly who he was. The hospital database had flagged his DNA from a previous state-mandated screening. "You need a transplant to live," Clara said, her voice like ice hitting glass. "But the board doesn't prioritize patients with a history of systemic self-neglect and no support system. You're a non-compliant candidate, Mr. Vance." He reached for her hand, whispering, "Clara, I'm your father." She didn't flinch. She simply adjusted his IV drip. "My father died in a storm 25 years ago. You're just a patient who didn't follow the instructions. I've saved 3 lives today. I won't lose sleep over a ghost." The final blow came through the law. Elias had inherited a small plot of land from a distant relative. His only hope for a payout to fund his final months of care. But the sale was tied up in a brutal litigation. He crawled into the offices of Vance and Amp Associates, hoping for mercy. He was met by Jade, the youngest, a litigator known as the executioner. She sat behind a mahogany desk, sliding a stack of papers toward him. It wasn't a settlement. It was a bill for 25 years of backdated child support, adjusted for inflation and interest, totaling millions. "I've placed a lien on your inheritance," Jade said, leaning back with a predatory smile. "You'll die owning nothing, not even the dirt they'll bury you in. You taught us that life is about survival of the fittest, Dad. Thank you for the lesson." Elias ended his days in a state-run hospice, staring at a flickering television. He watched a news segment about the Vance sisters, the artist, the doctor, and the lawyer, donating a wing to a local women's shelter in honor of their mother, Sarah, who sat between them, glowing with pride and draped in pearls. The girls were happy. They were a fortress of sisterhood, forged in the fire of his abandonment. Elias died in the dark, clutching a crumpled note he tried to write to them. It was never sent. No one came to claim his body. The sisters didn't hold a funeral. They held a gala for their mother's 60th birthday instead. The music was loud, the room was full of love, and for the first time in 25 years, there was no noise, just the sound of a family that had finally outgrown its shadow. While the sisters became the blades that eventually cut their father out of existence, Sarah was the whetstone. For her, the revenge wasn't found in a courtroom or a gallery. It was found in the quiet, grueling victory of survival. In the early years, Sarah's life was a series of cruel calculations. She didn't have the luxury of moving on. While Elias was chasing a life free of burdens, Sarah was working 3 jobs: cleaning offices at dawn, waitressing at lunch, and filing papers at night. She remembered the night she sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd left his note, staring at a bank statement that showed $4.12. She would choose between a gallon of milk for the girls or the bus fare to get to work. She chose the milk and walked 6 miles in worn-out shoes. Every blister on her heel was a silent curse directed at the man who thought her daughters were noise. Sarah didn't raise victims. She raised survivors. She never spoke of Elias with tears. Instead, she spoke of him as a cautionary tale of weakness. To Maya, she gave her last few dollars for charcoal sticks, telling her, "Draw the world you want, because the one we have isn't enough." To Clara, she sat through fevers and scrapes, whispering, You have to be the one who heals, because no one is coming to save us. To Jade, she showed the eviction notices and debt letters, saying, "Learn the language of these papers so no one can ever use them against you." She was the spine of the family, the one who turned their studio apartment into a fortress of ambition. She skipped meals so they could have second helpings, telling them she wasn't hungry while her stomach cramped in protest. The day Elias died, Sarah was in a penthouse overlooking the city, a gift from the girls. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than Elias had earned in his final decade. When Jade called to tell her the legal matter regarding their father was closed and he was gone, Sarah didn't cry. She didn't even feel a sting of bitterness. She simply looked at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. She saw a woman who had been hollowed out by a coward and refilled with the gold of her daughter's success. That evening, Sarah sat with her daughters on the balcony. They were laughing, clinking crystal glasses of vintage wine. They weren't talking about the man who left, they were talking about Maya's upcoming exhibition in Paris and Clara's new research foundation. Sarah looked at her three girls, her masterpieces, and realized that the cruelest revenge wasn't the poverty Elias suffered. It was the fact that they had built a beautiful, glittering world where his name was never even mentioned. He hadn't just been replaced, he had been erased. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe, and stay tuned. More true stories are coming soon.